Alright, hello everyone and welcome to my first video. Today's video I want to show you a line against the Caro-Kann which brought me a lot of success. I played online and over the board, and I played about I want to say 2 years. And since I started playing it, I realized that Caro-Kann players have a lot of problem dealing with this line. And the reason is, well, it's actually the kind of a very classical line, but for some reason, not so many people play today. So, they do not face it very often, and that causes them to not know their stuff really well. So hopefully if you also watch this video, you will also get a lot of nice wins with this line. So, obviously the Caro-Kann is when with white play e4 and black responds with c6. So as you can see, black's idea is just to strike in the center with the move d5. Now what line we're gonna play? So of course d4, black plays d5, and the move knight c3. So now nowadays, instead of knight c3, many people for example play the move e5 or the move e takes d5, which are actually very good moves, but the problem is, because everyone is playing them, Caro-Kann players are ready to face them, and they have a lot of preparation against them. But the move knight c3 and the way that I want to recommend you to play that is kind of forgotten. So, but as you will see, it has a lot of venom in it. So black obviously takes on e4, that's basically the only move, knight takes c4. And here black has two choices basically. The old classical line, or I should say three choices. The old classical main line is the move bishop f5, which probably you have saw before, and it's a very big move, and we're gonna delve into it very deeply. Now there is another new move which actually gained a lot of popularity in the last few years, which is the move knight f6. And the main reason is that after knight f6, black takes with the e pawn and just has a very solid pawn structure on the king side. Black will just, try to castle king side and claim that he has no problems. But as we will see, we can put a lot of pressure on this setup as well. But maybe let's start actually with the least common move nowadays, the move knight d7. This move was popular 20-30 years ago, but right now is not very popular. And the reason is that white has a lot of dangerous option against it. Now I'm going to recommend to you a very simple option, a very easy to learn option, which is the move knight f3. But white has many setups here. The move bishop c4 is a good move. The move knight g5 is very dangerous. As you famously have probably saw some very famous game with this move knight g5. But I'm going to recommend a very simple move knight f3. We just want to develop our pieces. So black now plays knight gf6. That's the idea. The idea is that after we take knight f6, now black can recapture back with the knight. So knight takes f6. Now you play c3. So let's say now black wants to get his bishop out of the pawn chain, because if he just plays e6 immediately, this bishop will be stuck here. So let's say black plays bishop g4. And after h3, basically our idea in this line is to get the two bishops. And after we get the two bishops, we have a very good center, very good control over the center. And in general, I feel like white has a very nice advantage. So now probably the best move is just to take on f3. But first let's see what happens if black plays the kind of natural looking bishop h5. Now we just go after his bishop g4, bishop g6 and knight e5. We just want to basically take his bishop. So let's say black plays e6. Now we put the bishop on g2, which is kind of looking at a nice diagonal. And let's say black plays bishop d6, trying to hit our knight. Now we just take on g6 and play queen c2. And this line, in this position, well, basically we have a very simple position, a very nice advantage with the two bishops. And probably we want to develop this bishop here and even consider a long castle. But let's say you can also go short castle. In general, very nice position. White has more space, two bishops, and a very good position. So probably in this position after h3, black should take on f3. We just take queen f3, let's say e6, bishop d3, bishop e7, castles, and bishop f4. And again, we just have the two bishops, a very good, nice advantage. The rooks will go to e1 and d1. And one day you might consider pushing c4, which is a very typical idea in this kind of positions, to gain a space in the center and potentially threaten some pawn breaks in the center. So a very nice position for white in this variation. I don't think actually many people nowadays play the move knight d7. Okay, but now let's look at maybe the classical main line, which was bishop f5. So black immediately targets our knight in the center. So we play knight g3. Black goes bishop g6, and here I do recommend the main move, which is h4. But I just highlighted this move knight h3, which is also very interesting if you want to surprise your opponent. And obviously the idea is just to play knight f4 and attack this bishop. And if black doesn't know what he's doing, he's gonna end up in a lot of trouble quickly after knight h3. So as an alternative, I suggest if you wanna, you can have a look at this move knight h3. But the main line, I recommend h4, trying to obviously play h5 and harass this bishop, basically trapping it. So black plays h6, basically the only move. Now we go knight f3. Well, the idea is we want to play knight e5, and now the main move is knight d7 to stop knight e5, but sometimes black players play e6, which is not a terrible move, but it just allows our knight to go to e5. So we jump on this opportunity, and I just want to show this line for complete sake. So bishop h7, bishop d3, and this is a very common idea. We harass this bishop enough, now we just exchange it, so that we have a very huge lead in development, as you will see. So black has to take knight d7, and here's a very important idea I just wanted to mention, this move f4. So with this move f4, as you will see in the main line, we cannot play f4 because our knight is on f3. But here we simply play f4 and support our knight on e5. So if black ever takes on e5, we can just take with the f pawn and have like a fantastic center. And otherwise, black is facing some problems because, you know, next move we want to play knight h5 and basically park that knight there and kind of eye the g7 pawn. So it's not so easy for black to develop this dark square bishop, you know. And let's say if black just goes knight f6, you can just continue with bishop d2, preparing to go long castle. And already we can see that white has some kind of an attack on the king side in the future. So yeah, very good position for white. So now let's look at the main move. Black plays knight d7, stopping knight e5. Now we go h5, bishop h7, bishop d3, takes. And this is the main tabia of this line, the Caro-Kann. And, you know, on the Super Grandmaster level and very high level, this is considered kind of equal because black with very precise play can equalize. But I have a feeling in another level, in all the other levels, this is just not equal. White just has, as you can see, more space in the center, more space on the king side, and just has a lot of room to improve and to, you know, play. So I have a feeling this is just a very nice position for white, as I will show in some lines. Now in this position, black basically has two main plans. One is to go castle queen side and the other is to go castle king side. Now in case he goes castle king side, well, it's kind of more logical, but the problem with it is that, as you can see, we start with attack with some g4, g5 against the black king. And if he goes castle queen side, that's a little bit more solid, but it just means that white is having more space. So now, as you can see, we have a pawn on h5, which means that it's very hard for us to go castle king side. So now we also have a plan of going castle queen side, as you'll see. So now let's look at some lines. e6, we'll play bishop d2. I mean, bishop f4 also is possible, but then you have to sometimes deal with bishop b4 check, which can be a little bit annoying. So I just recommend bishop d2, it's more simple. Knight g6 and long castle. So now, as I said already, there is two plans for black. Let's first look at the plan where he goes castle queenside, so queen c7. Now I recommend this plan, very typical plan, as you will see. So knight e4. So what's the point of this move? Now you will see. After long castle, play g3. And obviously with this maneuver, with knight e4 and g3, we are preparing the move bishop f4. So let's say, if black is sometimes, if your opponent doesn't know what he's doing, he might play the very natural move, king b8, and just, after bishop f4, basically he's busted. He's just, his position is just collapsing. So basically g3 is trying to put pressure on black's position. And the best that I could find for black in this position, with, obviously the help of computer and super grandmaster games, probably your opponent will play something very passive and you will just get an advantage, like bishop e7, bishop f4. And already when we get this bishop to f4, you'll play next move king b1, probably c4, bring the rook into the center. Of course, first you need to make sure this pawn is defended, so it's not so easy to play this rook e1, but sometimes black just takes on e4, so this pressure is off, and you just have a very nice position. So now just I want to mention, like, black's best chance to fight in this position is to take knight e4, queen e4, knight f6. Now, a very typical idea, again, I want to emphasize, so you will see these patterns, repeat themselves again and again, that when black takes on e4 and attacks our queen with knight f6, you do want to retreat the queen to e2 with just a very nice square, because, if you go back to d3, there might be some c5 coming for you, so just be aware of that. So queen e2, bishop d6, black completes development, we play king b1, very useful move, king b8, c4. And I just want to stop here. Basically, white has a very nice position. Next move, we're going to play bishop c3, and we basically wait. Sometimes we can play with c5, sometimes we can play with d5, and in general, white has more space and a very comfortable position. You see, in this line, black is not getting checkmated, unlike the other line when we will see he goes castle kingside. But he just is sort of passive. He's not able to play this e5 or c5 breaks easily. And white just is a bit more comfortable and has more space. So I really like this kind of positions for white, and I hope you find them enjoyable. So let's get back now to this position, to the plan that actually most players choose, which is to go simply castle kingside. So bishop e7. Now here, basically we hit a crossroads. Now our plan is to play knight e4 and push the pawn to g4. But if you do it immediately, there's a chance that black will realize that and not commit his king to the king side. So I just recommend this move as played by many strong players, the move king b1. Just sort of a useful move, and kind of you are waiting for black. Now, since black already played bishop e7, it doesn't make sense to go castle queenside, because in the lines that we just saw, he is basically losing a tempi, and knight e4, g3, bishop f4 will come very quickly. So, basically everyone in this position will just go castle kingside. Now we go for this plan, knight e4, and we just want to push for g4, g5. Let's say have a sample line, c5 for instance, yeah? So c5 is a very typical move in this kind of positions. Black is trying to challenge our center and equalize, but now g4 comes. And, sometimes, okay, you might think, oh, I'm going to prepare g4 with rook to g1 and so on, but actually there is no need. We just go g4. So if black does nothing, something very slow, I don't know, cd4, then after g5 he's basically busted. I mean, this is just basically resigns, because, his knight is attacked. If he takes, we can go h6. This is just basically terrible. Let's say knight fg5 followed by h6, and all of white's pieces are coming around black's king, and that's just basically checkmate. So black should act very quickly, and the way that usually black players do it is they take on e4, queen e4, knight f6, As we saw in the previous lines, we play queen e2, park the queen on e2, very nice square. Black plays queen d5. And in this position as well, basically white has some options, which I'm going to recommend some of them. I would say the best move is knight e5. Just basically going forward, putting the knight on a very nice square in the center. The only downside to this move, I mean, if you can call it a downside, is that black gets to play queen e4, which is his idea, and we transform into an endgame, like after takes and bishop e1. But the point is that, we played bishop e1 to protect the f2 pawn, and then we want to play f3, so the g3 square is also covered. This is basically our idea. Let's say rook f8, f3, knight f6, bishop f2. And for example, I myself like this endgame a lot for white. We just have more space in the king side, in the center, all around the place, and we can also play c4 later. But also g4, by the way, to protect this pawn, and sometimes we want to push even further. But, some of the players might not like the look of this endgame, or they just don't like endgames in general. They want to keep queens and keep attacking. So I would recommend this as the main option too. I think this is just a very nice position for white. And if you are a fine endgame player, you can score many victories in this endgame, as I already have in both online and over the board. But if you want to avoid the endgames at all costs, I recommend here the move bishop to e3. And obviously what this does is that now queen e4 doesn't make any sense, because it's not threatening, to trade queens, and after rook h4, just a stupid move. So now the game gets very complicated. Let's say black plays b5, because, okay, he's trying to also generate some attack on the queen side. And now we can just, do basically what we did before. You can play g4, but also the move knight e5 is pretty nice. Bishop d6, knight d3. And basically now we are ready with g4, rook dg1, g4, g5, and it's a very sharp position. Probably if you are playing against an engine, the engine can easily equalize, but I feel like in a human game, this is just very, very scary to play with black, because, the black's counterplay is somehow very slow. Like, he has to, I don't know, do a5, a4, a3, b4. But, white just needs two moves, g4, g5, and we get to the black's king. So, in general, I feel like this is also a very nice try for white, and will probably give you many, many wins and a nice advantage. So now this is the state of school with this old classical line with bishop f5, which again, if two grandmasters are playing, probably black can equalize. But I feel like if you are not a grandmaster, this is just a very nice position for white. So I recommend you to try this. Now let's come to the last move, the trending move, knight f6. So, well, this move was not very popular for the obvious reasons that after we just take on f6, black pawn is doubled. But as I already indicated, black has is claiming that he has a very simple plan, very solid position, and nothing bad can happen to him. And I face this position a lot. And sometimes I struggle to come up with a plan against it, but now, as I will show you, I found a very nice plan that's actually many strong players are now playing it, and it just basically, it's making black's position kind of unplayable. Like, black has to know a lot of stuff to just survive. So now I will show you why I'm saying this. Now, before we go into that, I just want to mention here, gf6 is also a move. It's not a very good move, but black is basically trying to claim that there is some, he can play rook g8, put pressure on the g2 pawn, bishop g4, and sometimes e5. So he's trying to claim that this is some kind of interesting position. Now, because black is gonna play rook g8, I recommend strongly to you that we'll play the move g3, so that rook g8 is kind of useless. But the point is that here in this position, if you play g3, there is some queen d5 hitting the rook, and knight f3, bishop g4. Now this is actually playable. We can just play bishop g2, but somehow feels a little bit weird. Black might try some e5, I don't know. But so just to avoid this, we start with the move c3, waiting for black to determine this bishop. So now you see black has a problem. If black cannot play bishop g4, obviously. If black goes e6 or knight d7, then this bishop is just blocked. Yeah, let's say now it cannot go, behind the pawn chain, it's just stuck here. So all the black players that reach this position do is just play bishop f5. But now we go knight f3. Now they cannot go bishop g4. So you see, if here we did go knight f3, let's say instead of c3, then bishop g4 actually is a little bit annoying. So now after c3, bishop f5, now we go knight f3, e6, and now g3. And basically now we get what we want. Let's say bishop d6, bishop g2, we go short castle, and knight h4 is a very typical idea. Just hit this bishop, bishop g6. And here I just want to show one last move. I think already this position is just fantastic for white. You're just going to play rook e1, queen e2, maybe c4, and we just have this very nice bishop here. We have put pressure on here. And let's say, okay, here we play rook e1, right? Black here might consider castling kingside, and his position is maybe not so bad, although here still white is just better. But here white has a very strong move, bishop h6. So now, as you can see, we just control this diagonal, not allowing black to castle, and basically black's position is miserable. He's probably forced to castle queenside, I guess, but it just runs into white's attack, and just a4, b5, queen b3, rook fb1, whatever. And with this bishop here, you will not survive this. So this line with gf6 is maybe playable, but just very, very tricky and very risky for black. So the main move is knight e takes f6. Now the move order is a little more important. We start with c3, so guarding the d4 pawn. Black will go bishop d6 90% of the time. Other moves are basically inferior, like bishop e7. The bishop is just so passive on e7, doesn't do anything. So black wants to target this diagonal with his bishop, so bishop d6 makes a lot of sense. Now bishop d3 castles, and queen c2. This is a really important setup for white. So as you saw, we played c3, bishop d3, queen c2, and all of these are lining against the h7 pawn, so we did all of this to hit this pawn. And as it turns out, because black exchanged his knight on f6, there is not an easy way to defend this h7 pawn. So black throws in a check, rook e8 check, knight e2. And now he's facing with a very important dilemma, that how to protect this pawn. He has basically three ways of defending it. And actually the most logical ways are not very good, and the least logical way is actually the best one. So black has g6, h6, and h5. I mean, surprisingly, h5 I think is actually the only decent move in this position. So actually not so many people already know this. Now let's see what's the problem with other moves. So let's say black plays g6. He just says, okay, I'm gonna block his diagonal for good. But since we not have castled yet, we just start an attack h4 and h5. And let's say we have something like this. This position, basically, we have opposite side castling, as you can see. Black hasn't started any attack yet, and white already got a pawn to h5, bishop on h6. We have a battery here, and already sacrifices are coming. Knight f4 is coming, g4 might be coming, rook to g1, just everything. And black's position is under a lot of pressure here. It's on the verge of collapsing. So this is just very, very dangerous. And I think already black can resign basically in a practical game. Maybe computer can defend this, but this is just so dangerous. So g6 not a very good move. The move h6 is kind of playable, but there is one downside with it, that it might not look so obvious, but it weakens this f5 square. So later we might play knight g3 to f5, and black has to be very careful not to allow it. So we play bishop e3, knight e7, and let's say, well, here you can go long castle, it's possible, something like this. But here I just like going short castle to use this f5 square. So let's say knight f8, knight g3. As you can see, our knight is coming to f5, and it's not so easy for black to develop this bishop. So let's say he goes bishop g4, rook a1, queen c7, and f4. And basically what we wanted is threatening now is to play f5 and h3 and trap this bishop. So, you know, if black is too careful, he just should basically retreat this bishop. But now on top of we can play f5 and just keep expanding on the king side. You can also play knight f5, or even, I think the better move, bishop f5. Just exchanging these bishops and getting your knight to f5. And, you know, white probably can have some attack on the king side later. So this is also very dangerous for black. Now finally black's players realize that actually the only move that makes sense is h5. And the idea of h5 is that if you go short castle, black wants to play h4 and stop this knight g3 idea. And even though this pawn on h4 might look a little bit weak, actually black's position here is quite solid, and I didn't manage to get any advantage here. It's certainly playable for white, but I don't like it that much. Black's also later might consider going h3 and somehow start some business on the king side. So instead of this, I recommend going for the castling queen side plan, which I think is actually has a lot of venom in this position. So we just go bishop e3, knight e7, black develops, long castle, knight f8, king b1, bishop e6, and c4. And basically it was this position that I was talking about, that computer will equalize here. So with the best play, black can equalize finally. But in general, this is very dangerous. And the reason is that, like, we are basically better in every side of the board. We have the very nice center, space advantage in the center. And also on the king side, we have some ideas of going h3, g4 and start an attack on the king side. So this position is also just really, really nice. And I just want to show you a variation. You know, it doesn't have to happen. It's just somehow analysis, but it happened in some grandmaster games. So you just get a feeling of what's going on in this variation. So rook c8, knight c3, bishop b4. Okay, bishop b4 is a strange move, but computer suggested it, and the idea is to just take on c3 and eliminate this knight. So just like this, and play b5. Now it's a typical break in this kind of position. That's why I showed it, that black plays b5, and it's not clear what to do, because if you take obviously this is terrible, just opening up the c file for black. So don't do that. If you do nothing, black can take on c4, and this d4 pawn is weak. So all in all, I'm saying that also if you play c5, just give away this very nice d5 square, let's say for the queen or the bishop or the knight, even somehow, if that reaches there, I don't know, somehow. But here, white has a very typical and powerful break that you might want to remember it. It's a very returning pattern in this kind of position. White plays d5, basically sacrificing a pawn. So now everything in black's position is hanging, so he has to take d5, and now we play c5. We have a very strong passed pawn on c5, which can even be protected with b4. The b5 pawn is under attack. We have the d4 square for now our bishop, and still we can start attacking on the king side. So this just was a very nice idea in this position. And so I believe that's all for this how to play against the Caro-Kann. I just wanted to give you this repertoire that I'm using, and I think it's very nice. If you have any suggestions or anything about these lines that I just showed you, please let me know in the comments. And if you like this video, please consider subscribing and liking this video. I will make a lot of other videos like this about the opening theory. I'm kind of a opening nerd. And so if you have any other opening that you want me to make a video about it, just let me know in the comments. So thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.